The MLB leader in ERA since July 1st among qualified starting pitchers is not Paul Skeens or Tariq Skubal. It's Taj Bradley, the 15th rounder from the 2018 draft by the Tampa Bay Rays. He has dealt in the month of July. So how did the guy who put up a 5.59 ERA in 100+ innings last season turn things around? It's simpler than you think, and it allows me to use one of my favorite phrases. The Rays have done it again. Let's start this video with some thoughts on Stuff Plus. This is the combination of variables that sum up into how we expect a pitch to perform based on how other similar shapes have performed historically. Things like velocity, release height, extension, vertical and horizontal movement all sum up into Stuff Plus. It's super valuable when we have small sample because it stabilizes quickly, which means it becomes indicative of what will happen. When Taj Bradley debuted in 2023, he popped in Stuff Plus. He had a 131 Stuff Plus fastball, which is a pitch that's bordering on double plus. The average for Stuff Plus is somewhere around 100. So being double plus means that you are better than 98% of the fastballs in MLB on a raw stuff basis. His cutter graded out as an average to above average pitch. His splitter was also an above average pitch, and he had a peripheral curveball. His net Stuff Plus, so combine all these individual grades, look at how much he's using the pitch, and then come up with one number, was a 110. Among qualified starters, this was a top 20 Stuff Plus pitcher, next to some very good names. But he posted a 5+ ERA, and he allowed almost 2 home runs per 9 innings. Stuff Plus gave us an indication almost immediately that something Bradley was doing was good, and it suggested that with a few changes he could excel. The thing I love about public analysis is that a lot of the time we're trying to answer very similar questions to what teams are trying to answer internally, just with different levels of information. So in the case of Taj Bradley, entering last offseason, the Rays were trying to answer the question, why is he underperforming his Stuff Plus so much, and what can we do to fix it? And given the fact that Taj Bradley is now very good, we have those answers. So what did the Rays change? There's 2 things that jump out to me. The first one is that they reworked his cutter. Bradley got crushed by right-handed hitters. He allowed a 600+ slug and missed an average amount of bats. His cutter was rough in terms of in-zone performance. There was a lot of overlap between where he was throwing the pitch and where he was allowing damage, as you could see in these heat maps. This was a pitch he used 30% of the time or more in both 2-strike situations and behind in the count situations. It was integral to his mix, and it was not good. So the Rays did something that I've seen them do before. They pushed the velocity of this pitch. It was just under 89 miles per hour in 2023. This year, it's averaged just under 91 miles per hour, a 2-tick increase. When velocity increases on these cutter slider type pitches, we generally see some increase in vertical break because as something is thrown harder, there's more backspin, thus more resistance to gravity, and it ends up higher on a pitch plot like this, which is representing how much a pitch is resisting the downward force of gravity. The Rays executed this exact thing with 3-month wonder Robert Stevenson, and it earned him a massive contract with the Angels before he went down with an injury. In Stevenson's case, the tweak was a slight adjustment to how the ball was placed in his hand and an increase in his intent. Simply something like, throw the crap out of this pitch. For Bradley, I think the Rays made an orientation tweak with his cutter, which you can see right here. And I would guess there was some similarity to Stevenson, where they cued him to up his intent with the pitch and throw it harder. The swinging strike rate on Bradley's cutter went from 14% last season to 18% this season. Below average to above average. The 682 slug he allowed has come way down below 300, and the ground ball rate on the pitch has sharply improved from 37% to 56%. It's just a better pitch. And before we move on to number 2, I just want to point out that the Rays are going to do this exact thing again and again and again. They just acquired Dylan Lesko from the Padres for reliever Jason Adam. Lesko doesn't have the same level of strikes that Taj did at the same age, and Taj is throwing harder right now than Lesko, but their fastball traits are similar. They're big fastball carry guys with higher than average release points who have great off-speed pitches and need something better from a breaking ball perspective. As a general premise, if you're good at creating efficient spin on your fastball or carrying the ball well, like Taj Bradley or Dylan Lesko, it's a bit harder from a pitch design standpoint to go into a variety of different breaking ball shapes. There's just less options. there's more options for the guys who kind of cut their fastballs or on the side of the ball more. So my angle in thinking about all this from the Rays perspective, and you see this with the Dodgers too, is that they prize that carry four-seam shape. So as a result of that, a lot of their pitchers don't have a plethora of options from a breaking ball standpoint. So what I think they do is just push the velocity of the pitch. This guy's good at getting behind the ball. Getting behind the ball and cutter slider shapes allow us to push the velocity of them. Why don't we just push the velocity of those pitches and have the results follow? Dylan Lesko's cutter slider thing is currently 85 miles per hour, and he has a 93 mile per hour fastball. My prediction is that this breaker Lesko throws just becomes a harder pitch relative to his fastball over time. You can predict a fastball velocity increase with him, which makes sense, and that would boost the cutter velocity. He's only a high schooler, etc. But I'm talking more so that it will have a smaller velo gap to the fastball, even if he increases his velocity. Whether it happens right away or after he debuts like a Taj Bradley, I'm not entirely sure. But as we saw in my Kate Smith video with the Guardians, teams have tendencies, and for good reason. If it works, just do it again. The Nationals scooped another weird lefty in Alex Clemming from the Guardians at the deadline. They also have Mackenzie Gore, Mitchell Parker, and DJ Hers. The Red Sox traded for Quinn Priester. Priester's plots look exactly like that of Brian Bayo's. They're probably going to scrap the four-seam fastball, lean on the sinker slider. We've seen this before. Is this a coincidence in either of these situations? Probably not. The Rays just have a knack for getting these carry fastball types to have banger secondaries by pushing velocity. And you can see this in their aggregated minor league data. The Rays have the hardest average sliders in the minor leagues right in front of the Dodgers. They have the second highest chase rate on those sliders. They also have the second highest strike rate and a top 5 zone rate. They throw sliders hard and they throw them in the zone. It's an org philosophy that is beautifully integrated from the majors through the minors. But let's get back to Bradley's development. The second thing they did was increase his splitter usage. This was a pitch that he appeared to be toying with for much of last year. The velocity and vertical break of the pitch changed start to start last year until he found a point for the pitch to settle on late in the season. Again, I want to focus on righties here because that's where his issues were. His splitter usage went from 4% to 24%, a huge jump. In two-strike situations, it's clear the directive this season was to back off the curveball and lean on the splitter. But Taj was actually pretty good in two-strike situations last year, so this adjustment isn't really earth-shattering. The far more interesting thing is that when he's behind in the count this season, his splitter usage has jumped. It's gone from 3% to 16%, while his cutter usage has come down from 36% to 25%. Nearly all pitchers allow a lot of behind in count damage at a higher rate than when they're even or ahead. I think there's an opportunity to highlight what pitchers are trying to do in these spots, what they're changing in those situations, and how it changes their aggregate performance. Most of the time when a pitcher is behind, you'll see them move towards pitches that allow weaker contact and something they can strike. They're moving their strategy of trying to generate a swing and miss or strike out a batter to just not walking the guy and trying to stay in the zone with the peripheral hope of weak contact if there's bat on ball. That was Bradley's intent with his cutter when he fell behind. And while he's still using the cutter in those situations this season, about a quarter of the time, he's jacked up the splitter usage, a pitch with room for more whiffs. The results aren't incredible, but they're better than last year. His expected slug was over 1,000 in 2023, and now it's a hair above 500, where the league average is somewhere around 600. Bradley is taking on a bit more risk from an in-zone perspective because his splitter won't generate strikes as much as his cutter or his four-seam fastball. But the potential damage that he'd allow on his splitter in these situations is almost surely lower than what we'd expect him to allow on this cutter. And he's not alone in backing off fastball variations when he's behind in the count. Both George Kirby and Bailey Ober have taken this approach recently. Kirby hadn't thrown a behind in count splitter all season to a righty. And then since the calendar flipped to July, he's now throwing it 15% of the time. Ober started throwing his changeup more after a rough patch from mid-May to mid-June, and it leaked into his behind-in-count approach to righties. His changeup went from 6% to 15% over his last 6 starts. The takeaway is to find a way to not throw your pitches that allow more damage when you're behind in the count. And the trend I think we're seeing is that strike throwers like Kirby and Ober, and I'll put Bradley on the peripheral of that group, are willing to accept more risk of walks to lower the threat of damage. I wonder if this is something we'll see in a lot of other pitchers as the years progress. The Rays are very good at pitching development. This is a sentiment that you will hear echoed throughout anybody you talk to, I think, in Major League Baseball, even if there's some hesitancy in calling them the best because maybe they're not totally integrated from a biomechanics and delivery understanding standpoint. They allow a lot of injuries, but I think for the most part, they just also accept a lot of risk on the injury side of things. They have a higher risk tolerance, but that's besides the point here. They're good at it, and they have some very distinct things they do in the minor leagues that we see trickle up to the major leagues. And I think that integration is very important for their success. We saw this with Taj Bradley in terms of throwing that cutter slider thing he throws harder. And I really think that helped unlock a lot of his right-handed hitter approach this season and pushed him to be one of the more interesting sub 25-year-old pitchers in all of Major League Baseball. But I also think we could zoom out a little and potentially learn something from this video on the perspective of Stuff Plus in particular. I love it as a tool. I think it's really important to use it from a baseline understanding of a pitcher because you very quickly understand what shapes this guy executes. You just also have to realize the limitations of it. There are a lot of limitations, I think, to Stuff Plus, particularly with left-handed pitchers. Maybe that's a topic for another day. But I just think generally as well, if a guy's underperforming their Stuff Plus, I get the idea of just betting on him going forward and assuming that he will pitch down to his Stuff Plus. But the other argument I'll throw out there is that if nothing changes per se, I'm not totally convinced that a lot of those guys with high stuff perform right off the bat. And what does that imply? It implies that stuff probably isn't everything, which is a very obvious statement. Location, etc., sequencing, all these things matter. But the better teams in MLB as a whole from a development standpoint take the baseline Stuff Plus that is high, get the guy to the major league level, and then optimize the little things that maybe don't pop in the stuff models, but allow the guy to actually turn into a tried and true major leaguer. The great example of this, I believe, is Taj Bradley. So thanks for hanging out in this video. I hope you learned something. Comments, as always, appreciated. Subscribe to my Substack. I'll link to that in the details. And thank you for watching.